Okay, so Raspberry Pi from laptop. No monitor or keyboard or mouse. All right, this is what we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to talk about the couple of technologies we're going to need to enable on our Pis, and we're going to have to do these one time, and I'm going to help you do them up here. So technically you could accomplish this. We're going to try to do it the hack way so you never actually need a keyboard or mouse. All right, so the tools we're going to use is a protocol called SSH. This is Secure Shell. So this allows us to remote into our Pi with a text-based interface. So it'll look kind of like this type thing. In fact, you can see I was previously connected to the Pi through this, so we'll see how that works. We're also going to use something called VNC Viewer / VNC Server. So this guy gives us graphical control of our Pi. All right. So now the steps. Now I'm going to go ahead and have everybody, we're going to start by getting everybody here on the same page. So if do not join FalconNet. So either get on guest, or if you, ResHall currently is down in here, which is what we were going to try to get you on, but there is a Wi-Fi up called Mike Wi-Fi. If you join that, the password is 0123456789. I promise you that is sharing ResHall. Don't ask me how. That's sharing, that's sharing ResHall. All right, so either get on guest or get on Mike Wi-Fi. It doesn't matter which of the two, because our first goal here is let's access our Pi remotely. Okay? So first step is on our computer, we need to share our internet over our Ethernet. So if you're on a Mac, both of them are like under internet sharing. So on a PC, if you just do a search for internet sharing, or for a Mac, you just do sharing, it'll bring up something that looks along these lines. And let's just show you on Windows. Windows 10 internet sharing. All right, so it looks like you go to your Wi-Fi connection. And right-click on it and go to Properties. And then there should be a tab that says Sharing. Just share that connection. Yeah, so you'll right-click on your wireless connection inside of Windows. So that'll be, if I do this. You can do it. Oh, I don't have wireless on this machine because it's through a virtual machine. Somebody else have their Windows internet sharing thing set up that they can show other people? Okay, so it's fine. It's the rules are the same whether you're doing it on the Mac or not. So I'll just show it to you here on the Mac. So on the Mac side, I'm turning on internet sharing, so I'll turn it off here for a second. So you come here to System Preferences, You want this little blue folder that has the yellow thing on it for sharing. If you're on Windows, you'll select your, go into your network connections and right click on your Wi-Fi connection to hit properties. Somewhere in there, you'll have a tab for sharing. On the Mac, you just have a thing that says internet sharing. Click that. It's asking you if you're sure you want to share your internet connection. Say yes. This is why you can't be on FalconNet. FalconNet is an enterprise wireless connection, and therefore it does not allow you to share it. It's like for security purposes. So either get on guest or get on my shared res hall. So click start, and your machine should not scream at you at this point. And your internet connection is being shared. On the Mac, notice by default it said my Mac doesn't have an Ethernet port plugged into it, so I have this little dongle over USB-C. So here's my USB 10/100/1000 local area network. So this is me sharing my wireless from Wi-Fi to Ethernet. That's the magic sauce here. All right, so now my laptop here is willing to let computers that plug into its Ethernet with their Ethernet port, this guy, it's willing to hand these guys fake IP addresses to try to share their internet with them.
If you don't have the connector for your computer, you're going to need one.
You're going to need to be able to plug in through Ethernet.
Okay.
Yep, one way or another.
It's those bigger one I've got the link. I think I don't know if it's like link on there.
Oh, okay.
So the mini DVI.
Yeah. I have one in my room. I just
Okay. Well, I mean, if you want, just listen to us right now, and then you'll see how it works. And then when we're setting people up, you can go get it because we'll just do your SD card last. All right, so that's all I need to do with my laptop. I've told my laptop to share its wireless connection over the Ethernet. All right, so now I have my Raspberry Pi here, and I've already gotten Raspbian installed on this SD card. So it's, however you accomplish that the first time is fine. All right, so I'm going to show you what our ultimate goal is so you can see what's possible. And then we'll work on getting everybody to that point. Okay? So one thing is I'm going to plug from my Raspberry Pi Ethernet into my Ethernet port on my Mac here. I'm going to go ahead and shut down Windows so it doesn't kill my battery here. All right, so now some of you might be powering your Raspberry Pi off the wall. Your Pis came with a little USB dongle thing that plugs into the wall. Well, if you get a USB-C Ethernet or USB-C to USB cable, same thing you would use to charge like your cell phone, something like that, you could actually power your Pi right off your laptop. Okay, so my Pi is now turning on right off the laptop, powered off the USB. So it's plugged into the USB-C port. And I currently have nothing hooked to it in terms of a monitor or keyboard or mouse or any of that stuff. All right, so go ahead.
What if your Raspberry Pi doesn't have a port for this?
Any of the new Raspberry Pis would. Yeah, if you have an older one, then you would have to, Pi Zero, you'd have to either get an adapter or there's ways to connect to it over USB, but this tutorial is not going to do that. This is over Ethernet only. Okay, so my Pi is booting up. Give it a couple of minutes, make sure the OS is booted behind the scenes. Because I have it plugged into the Ethernet, it's going to get a fake IP address. Now, the Pis, by default, use a technology that Apple actually kind of tried to make somewhat famous a long time ago called Bonjour. So Bonjour was used by Apple for printer sharing for a long time. And for those of you who are on Slack and saw I gave you that link if you're a Windows user to go and get to download the Bonjour plugin for Windows for printer sharing. Pretty small file. Just download that guy. So if you're a Windows user, go to support.apple.com. I gave you the link. And here's download Bonjour print services for Windows. So download that and install that on your Windows machine. If you're a Mac user, you won't need this. Your Mac already knows about Bonjour. Now, all Bonjour is it creates an abstraction between an IP address and something like, for us, it'll be Raspberry Pi local. All right, so by default, your Raspberry Pi has a network name called Raspberry, I think it's Raspberry Pi, like that, .local. Every one of yours has that. Okay, but you can only get to that address without putting in a real IP address if you have Bonjour enabled on your computer. That allows Bonjour to go out and search for the, quote, printer named this. In this case, it's your Raspberry Pi, and it will figure out what the IP address is. Let me show you that real quick. So my Pi has been booting for a little bit now, so it's probably up and running. So I'm just going to come out here to the terminal on the Mac. So if you're on Mac, you need to go out to terminal. If you are on PC, you want to grab the PuTTY client. So for PC, we say SSH Mac is built in, PC, PuTTY client. That lets you do SSH on a PC. All right. Similarly, we'll go ahead and just get these things downloaded while we're at it. We're going to need VNC Viewer. All right, so go to the website I gave you, Real VNC. Click on Mac OS or Windows, whatever your OS is. So if you click on Windows, you want to download VNC Viewer. You can choose which kind of file you want to download. If you get this exe, x86 or x64, this will actually just download it as a standalone. You don't even have to install it. It'll just be a program that's sitting there. Or you can get an installer that'll put it on your computer so it's in your My Programs folder and stuff. But download VNC Viewer, it's tiny, and get it installed on your computer. Similarly with Mac OS, download VNC Viewer. All right, because over time you might end up liking connecting to your Raspberry Pi via a terminal like this. So let me just show you some proof of concept stuff now that you get those two things downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ping Raspberry Pi.local. All right, so notice here, now if you're a Mac user, you already have the ping program. If you're a PC user, you don't, but don't waste your time going and getting it. Ping just says, I'm going to go over the internet, and I'm going to search for something, and I'm going to tell you where I found it. It told me it found the IP address that was handed to my Raspberry Pi was 192.168.2.3. That's all fine and good. If you know the IP address, then you wouldn't need to use that Bonjour stuff. Okay, but since we don't necessarily know what IP address was handed out to it, this is helpful for us. All right, so now the baseline thing we might do is we might say, I want to use SSH, or for those of you who are Windows users, you're going to use PuTTY, and you're going to connect with user Pi, that's the default username for Raspberry Pis, at Raspberry Pi.local. So I'm saying I want to secure shell as user Pi at this address, Raspberry Pi.local. When you press enter, the very first time, oh, interesting. Excuse me a moment. I was using a different Pi in my office. So let me do, all right, so this is what you'll see the very first time. Anyways, it's popping up and it's saying, are you sure you want to continue connecting to something? It's going to give you this weird SHA-256 security hash looking thing, because we are securely connecting to this. And you just say, yes, I'm sure. All right, now it wants to know the password for the Pi user on your Raspberry Pi. So unless you changed yours, the default one will be Raspberry, right? Raspberry? If you changed your username to something else, it'll be something else. So I'll go ahead and press enter. And now I am connected to my Raspberry Pi. Only powered off of the USB on my laptop and off the Ethernet. That's all fine and dandy if we just want to do some command line stuff, which over time, this might be stuff you end up liking doing. But generally speaking, we want to use actual Raspbian on our computer and be able to see it so it's like a real user interface. All right, so once I'm logged in with SSH, we'll have to do this every single time when you first start your Pi up, but you only have to do it one time each time, is I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna say VNC server. So we're gonna run a computer program that's already pre-installed on the Pi. I'll show you how to get it turned on here in a little bit. So this is already on the Pi, and this will start hosting the Pi as a GUI OS. All right, so I'm gonna just type in VNC server, I'm gonna press enter, and it's gonna tell me my new desktop is running at 192.168.2.3:1. It's also running at raspberrypi.local:1. Those two are synonyms. So I'm just going to copy that. And I've already downloaded VNC Viewer on my computer. So this is that other program. So this is VNC Viewer sitting on your desktop of your Windows machine or on your Mac. You'll paste in the IP address where the, that it told you there. So right here it says new desktop is at 192.168.2.3:1. That's where that VNC desktop lives. So within VNC, I can just put, I want to connect to 192.168.2.3:1, press enter. And if I already have mine set to save my username and password, it's yelling at me because it doesn't like the fact that I'm still using the default password. So choose your poison. Because I'm demoing it for people who maybe haven't changed their password, I'm just gonna leave it. But there we go. We have VNC completely running on, or your Pi running on your computer over Ethernet, just powered by the USB from your laptop. All right, so are we all convinced it's possible? that's the starting point. We had to jump through a couple of hoops, but now we want to go through the process of how did we get that? So how do I get all of your machines ready to do this? And we have a couple of little sticking points. I'm going to show you how to accomplish this right off the bat. So what we'll probably do is we'll probably have, just for the sake of time, we still have one machine back there that they can plug into, and then I can have my machine. I have a keyboard and mouse up here. Just for the sake of time, just have it booted in, run these couple of configuration things, and be good to go, rather than editing scripts and stuff on an SD card. So what you'll end up doing is, once you have your Raspberry Pi hooked up to a monitor, the one time you're going to have to do this, you'll click on the Raspberry. You'll go to, is it under Preferences? Go under Preferences, Raspberry Pi Configuration. And that's going to bring up this window like this. go to interfaces, and you want to make sure that, because by default SSH and VNC are turned off. So you want to enable SSH. That says, from now on, you can talk to me text only. And this is VNC. Now it says, from now on, you can talk to me using the graphical user thing. That makes sense? And then you hit OK. Once that's done, you can then, mine's already like that, you can then go and shut down your Pi. From that point forward, your Pi will start listening on SSH when it boots up. You won't need a keyboard or mouse anymore after you have the other things set up. Okay, that makes some sense? All right, so that is the mode we need to get all of our Pis into. Now, there is a little bit of a trick. I'm going to see if I can prove it here real quick. So I'm going to go into preferences here, and I'm going to go to recommended software. I'm sorry, Raspberry Pi configuration. I'll go to interfaces. I'm going to disable both SSH and VNC. That'll put it into the same format yours is currently in. Okay? And I'll hit OK, and it's going to want me to reboot this thing. So now it's a stock Raspberry Pi install with SSH and VNC turned off. I'm just going to say shut down. I'm going to say, what if I don't want to have to go to a monitor and keyboard and mouse to have to enable those things? Is there a way around it? So I'm going to what's the password? Raspberry is a really hard word to spell, isn't it? There we go. All right, so at this point, my Raspberry Pi is shutting down. I could take it over to a computer, log in with a monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and get it set up the way I just did it, but I'm gonna try to fake it. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna unplug this from USB. I'm gonna take out my SD card. Now, from what I've looked at, there's a little hack in Raspbian that if you load the Raspberry Pi SD card into a computer and you edit some files, so I'm actually, just for convenience, I'm going to edit on Ubuntu. I know you might not have Ubuntu on your machine, but it would be very quick just for everybody to put their SD card into my machine real quick and make a little edit. So I'm going to see if this will accomplish what I want it to accomplish. So I'm going to open a file, and this is the directory that was put onto my computer, this boot directory. This is what's inside of the Raspberry Pi. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file inside of boot. So I'm going to say File, New File. I'm not going to put anything in it. I'm going to save this file as just SSH. All right, so now inside this boot folder, I should have a file called SSH that has nothing in it. The idea is if your SD card has a file in it called SSH, Raspbian will automatically start the SSH daemon so you can remote into your thing and get the rest of it set up from the command line. So let's see if this worked. So all I did is just threw a file on that guy from Raspberry Pi, or from the boot directory. You could do that on Windows, but actually I think this is a Windows friendly partition, the boot partition, so you'd be able to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and just unmount my SD card. It said I didn't like that, but we're just going to call that okay. I'll plug it back into my Pi. And then I'll plug my USB back in to turn the Pi on. It's still hooked up over Ethernet. Now, right now, the theory is at best, I'm going to be able to SSH to it. I won't be able to VNC to it yet, but I can finish teaching it to work for VNC through SSH. All right, so we'll give this guy a minute, let him boot up, and we'll see if we get a SSH. I haven't tried this yet, so if we don't, then we won't mess around with it anymore. We'll just go to the monitors up here and the monitor over there and just get everybody turning on VNC and SSH on their Pis, and it'll just work from that point forward. Okay, so it is finding it. So there's my IP address. I'm going to go ahead and try to SSH into it. Seems to be okay with it. All right, so I'm in my Pi. So I just created a file called SSH in the boot directory and then restarted the Pi, and that tricked it into starting SSH by default. All right, so now I still can't run VNC server on this guy, but if I do raspy, I think it's raspyconfig. The command is called raspyconfig, and I press enter. Okay, it's a root script, so I got to say su, super user, raspyconfig. Raspyconfig. Try oh, I said su. It's sudo. Do as super user. Raspyconfig. All right, that's better. So this is the non-GUI version of what we did a few minutes ago when we clicked on the Raspberry and did the drop down. So we're going to go to, let's see, interface options, number 5 here. And I'm going to make sure SSH is turned on. Would you like SSH server to be enabled? Yes. Okay, it's entirely possible it was already enabled. I don't know if that putting that file there makes it enabled for this point forward or just got us in once. So make sure you enable it. And then the other one is going to be interface options, VNC. Would you like to run VNC server? Yes. Now that guy's enabled. And there's other things in here that you can do, but don't worry about that. Just hit finish. Now your Raspberry Pi is prepared to run VNC viewer, having never plugged it into a computer, monitor and keyboard and mouse. All right, so does the big picture make some sense? I realize there's several moving parts, but keep in mind, once you get it working once, you won't have to go and enable SSH. You won't have to go and enable VNC. You won't have to mysteriously put files in magical places. Okay, the only thing you'll have to do after you have this all working is turn on your Pi, SSH into it, and run this one command, VNC server. Well, this command right here. And then it'll tell me where it's running, and then I can launch VNC viewer to use the OS then. And now I have a full working version of Raspbian running in what this is called VNC running in headless mode. Okay, so we're actually running a graphic user interface for our Linux distribution without a monitor, actually without a graphics card. So the head is actually the head on the graphics card. We're actually doing it all through software. Okay, so couple of hurdles. If you're on a Mac, things are easier for you because Macs just understand Bonjour. The first hurdle for non-Mac users is to get that Bonjour file installed so that your computer can now see things called something.local, raspberrypi.local. Otherwise, you'll have no way of knowing, what I had done here if I just backspace. When I ran ping here, I wanted to get the IP address of this guy. I know my Mac can resolve this to a real network address. So I'm going to say, show me where this guy is, and now I have the IP address. 192.168.2.3. So from this point forward, if I never want to use that Raspberry Pi thing again, I wouldn't have to once I know the IP address once. And what I've noticed is my Pi always gets the same IP address. My machine hands out the same IP address to it every single time. So now I can SSH to Pi at that IP. And now I'm using my Pi at the command line. All right. So that would be the first thing that you want to try to accomplish on a PC, is being able to run PuTTY, which is the SSH client. The Mac comes with PuTTY already built in. So when I type in SSH like that, you're going to have a client called PuTTY where you'll put in the username is Pi, the IP address is raspberrypi.local, and then you'll hit connect, and it should connect to it. All right, so first goal is let's get everybody on SSH, connecting to their Pis one way or another. If you don't want to power your Pi off a USB port, that's okay. This is just, the magic of not having to bring your power connector with you. All this guy is doing is giving this guy electricity, and probably not as stable electricity as you're getting off of your power thing that you can plug into the wall. All right, makes some sense? All right, so we have one setup back there. All right, and then I have a setup up here that I have a little tiny keyboard and a little tiny mouse, but one thing we can try is I can try just writing to your SSD cards real quick, just that SSH file. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop my recording here because we proved that would work. So